This is Curl Up with a Cattail, and I'm Gwen Cooper, the New York Times bestselling author of numerous cat-centric titles, including Homer's Odyssey, A Fearless Feline Tale, or How I Learned About Love and Life with a Blind Wonder Cat, Spray Anything, More True Tales of Homer and the Gang, and The Book of Possum, Head Bonks, Raspy Tongues, and 101 Reasons Why Cats Make Us So happy. We're here to celebrate all things feline and to tell inspirational cat tales. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to an all-new episode of Curl Up with a Cattail with Gwen Cooper. I'm, of course, Gwen Cooper, your host, and delighted, as always, to be here with you today. I'm particularly delighted because later on in this episode, we are going to be talking with Charlotte Maxwell-Jones, who is the founder and director of Kabul Small Animal Rescue, and someone whose work we have been anxiously and eagerly following for at least the last 5 months, ever since the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, when Charlotte attempted unsuccessfully to evacuate herself with her staff, her Afghani staff, and some nearly 300 rescue cats and dogs, in an attempt to bring them to North America and to better lives. That attempt was unsuccessful at the time, as so many of you will remember. And we were all unbelievably just devastated and heartbroken at the time, especially because Charlotte was forced to release more than 150 dogs that had been in her care out into the airport. She was not allowed to take them back to her shelter facility. She's not sure why, and frankly, neither am I. Nor, obviously, was she allowed to leave the country with them. And so I guess there was a feeling that it would be inhumane to just leave them stacked in crates, which, of course, it would have been at the airport. And so they were released onto the airport grounds. And I remember, and it is, I guess I should, spoiler alert, say, for those of you who have not yet heard the news, that this past week, Charlotte was finally, after 5 months of unbelievable effort, able to get 286 cats and dogs safely out of Afghanistan and to new lives in North America. And she's going to talk to us about that. And I'm also pleased, I guess, to be able to say that of the 150 some odd dogs that she was forced to release into the airport, she was able, ultimately, she and her staff, they went back to the airport every single day after that, and ultimately were able to recapture, I guess is the best word, all but between 20 and 25 of them. And I'm actually going to keep this pretty short because Charlotte and I had, this part of the podcast that is up top, because Charlotte and I had a pretty long conversation, even longer than what was recorded, but the part that was recorded was itself pretty long. And I kind of want to get right to that with a couple of notes. Those of you who are longtime listeners of this podcast know that I record in my closet. And that is because I literally am sitting in my closet right now recording this podcast. And that is because the acoustics in my very old house with its very high ceilings and hardwood floors are such that there's just this incredible echo effect any place else I try to record. And so that is the primary reason why I do this podcast audio only. And it's not, there's no video. You're not sitting here looking at my face right now, which is probably for the best if I'm being honest, because even if the acoustics in my house were more conducive to allowing me to record someplace where I would have a more visually pleasing background than the inside of my closet, if I could be in my lovely living room recording there, I do kind of like the freedom of being able to sit here in the morning in my PJs, with my zit cream all over my face and talk to you as a voice in the dark, as it were. But I recorded my interview with Charlotte over Zoom, as I record all of my interviews, and I was able to see her as I was speaking with her, and I found myself, it was really the first time I found myself really sincerely regretful that this is an audio only podcast and that we don't have visuals as well. because it was remarkable to watch Charlotte's face as she talked. And she's a very attractive woman, by the way. But it's not that specifically that I'm referring to. Her face is very expressive. And I found myself more moved in listening to her than I have been in listening to anybody for a long time. And not just because she has this incredible story to tell. I mean, just this movie ready story, this one woman under the most adverse of circumstances imaginable, and what she suffered what she was able to accomplish and what she suffered and went through in order to accomplish it is something that still staggers me. And as a writer, it kills me that I cannot find words to express the enormity of what I feel when I think about it. But like all people who accomplish extraordinary things, Charlotte is obviously a very, very tough self-critic. And I know that the grief that she feels for the dogs that she ultimately was not able to rescue from, that she was forced to release in the airport, is very real. The grief is there, but also the guilt. She will say as much in the interview that she feels that she failed. And my grandmother used to have a saying that you can't put your head on somebody else's shoulders. And it was one of the very wise, my grandmother's a very wise woman. And it was one of the bits of wisdom that she gave me when I was very young that has remained with me all my life. And it's something I remind myself of on a near daily basis. And of course, the point of that expression is that it is impossible ultimately to make other people see things the way that you see them. And this, of course, is one of the great frustrations of the world, right? If only we could make other people, we could put our head on other people's shoulders and make them see the world as we see it. But I have rarely found myself wishing so intensely that I could make somebody else see something the way that I see it, as I found myself wishing as I was talking to Charlotte and watching her extraordinary face. I wished so intensely for a moment that she could see herself as I see her, and as so many of us see her, just for a moment. Because while I don't know that it would do anything to assuage her grief for animals who she loved and cared for and brought back to health and to trust of humans, and then ultimately lost, I know it would do nothing for her grief. I think it would do something for her guilt, because the woman is a hero. She is a hero. It is a word that I don't use a lot, and it is an accurate description. And I'm getting choked up. This for me was a very emotional conversation. And I'm really just so thrilled that I was able to speak with Charlotte and to bring her to you, at least in this form, for a little bit today. I will say, by the way, that Charlotte, and I love this about her, actually, Charlotte is very plain spoken, and she does not suffer fools gladly, and she expresses her opinions exactly as she feels them, and good for her. I guess, consider this your forewarning that some of her language is a little salty, which does not bother me at all, but I know that it does bother some people. And so if you are a person who finds that very difficult to listen to, consider yourself forewarned, and please do not, and this is an emphatic, do not write me to complain to me about it later. And it's not so bad, but everyone has different thresholds for these things, so I'm just putting it out there. And this is also a quick reminder that while I have just asked you to not contact me about any foolish objections you may have to any language that Charlotte uses, I do encourage you to contact me with any other questions or comments that you may have. And the best way of doing that is by heading over to my website, GwenCooper.com. And there's a page on my website for my podcast where you can leave comments. I do respond to comments. There's also a contact form on my website, and you can use that to email me directly. And of course, if you like what we do here, do not forget to hit that subscribe button so that you are notified of new episodes as soon as they become available. And if you could leave a review or at least a star rating on whichever podcast platform you are listening to this on, I would be incredibly grateful to you. And with that, we are going to take a very short break of about 30 seconds or so. And when we come back, we will be speaking with Charlotte Maxwell-Jones. So sit back, get comfortable, and stick around for more Curl Up with a Cattail. For sticking around. Our guest today is an East Tennessee native who earned her PhD in classical art and archaeology from the University of Michigan in 2015. She has over 15 years of experience conducting field research in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia, and has worked in Afghanistan since 2010, where she serves as the founder and director of Kabul Small Animal Rescue. In August of last year, she made international headlines during the American withdrawal from Afghanistan when she refused to leave without the rescue animals she was attempting to evacuate. And last week, after 5 months of Herculean effort, she pulled off what all of us had come to fear would be impossible when she finally succeeded in flying 286 cats and dogs to safety and new lives in North America. Today, she remains in Afghanistan and continues her work with Kabul Small Animal Rescue. I am both honored and humbled to be joined today by Kabul Small Animal Rescue founder and my own new personal hero, Charlotte Maxwell-Jones. Charlotte, welcome to this podcast that has been talking about you kind of obsessively, by the way, for the last 5 months.
Wow, well, that's a little crazy. I didn't know that. It's not for stalkers.
We are kind of internet stalkers. It's really still just hard for me to get my head around the scope of what you have done, not just in the last few months, by the way, but over the course of the last 10 years. And so, I guess the first question probably, and I've spoken with so many people who are so excited to get an opportunity to hear from you. And I think the first thing many of them would like to know, other than how they can donate to you, which I'm going to ask you to tell me in a second, is what you remain in Afghanistan. Why are you still there? And do you have any plans in the near future to return home?
I'm still here because we're still open. We got an OFAC license from the Department of Treasury in October of 2021. When we realized that we would need it legally to work here. And it's a 1-year license. It's renewable. We will try to renew it. And we're here simply because the need still exists. And there isn't somebody else to fill this gap. So a lot of our experienced staff have left. They've evacuated. So we need to build capacity. We're going to bring in foreign vets. We're going to bring in some foreign trained Afghan vets to do full training for all of our new veterinarians. We're going to spend some of the money raised to improve our facilities, make them just easier to get around, improve plumbing, electricity. We're going to work on getting some diagnostic equipment in here because that's been literally a killer for us because, it's a guessing game way too much of the time. And if we're going to continue, and I would like to do so, I want it to be as high quality as possible. And I don't want to succumb to the idea that, you have to stick with the standards that are out here simply because that's what's out here. So, I'll stick around here to help set that up. We do have other help doing that. So one of our board members is Louise Hasty. She's the director of War Pause, which is active in Iraq. And she also managed Nowzat for a long time here. So she's one of the few people in the world that knows the resources that we're dealing with, and the sort of the unexpected things that can come up, and knows how to help set up better protocols, better systems, how to bypass some of the problems. We're also working with Derek Stone, who's got enormous experience as a dog handler. And one of the things that we've sort of fallen into in the past few months is we've started taking care of all of the canines at the airport. It's run by the Taliban, as well as the Ministry of the Interior facilities. And we're going to start working on taking care of the canines at other regional airports. So we need somebody who actually knows how to deal with them. We're not going to be training them because that's not part of our license, but we are allowed to help them have better lives. We're allowed to feed them, give them medical care, put heaters in their kennels, try and make the life that they have to have more humane. So we'll be working on that. And
so just a couple of things. You have a short to-do list is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's super short.
Super short. You'll be done like in a weekend or two. I'm just, and this is a question I want to ask often. I want to reiterate this point before I go on to my next one. For people who want to support and contribute to your work, what is the best way for that? Somebody who has an extra $5 lying around and knows in their gut that there's no better way to spend it than to donate it to everything you're describing. How can they do so?
So we have a number of ways, depending on where you're from. Everything is available on our Facebook site. So if you're in the US, either PayPal or GoFundMe works well. If you're in the UK, then we ask that you donate through our sister organization, Warpaws, because then you get this thing called Gift Aid, which is basically the UK government adds on to any charitable donations. So it actually makes quite a bit of difference. And I think that, you talk about $5 and I think, many charities scoff at this and we really did seek large donors, right? Like we thought we needed them because the goals were just immense. And in the end, the entire flight, everything from the past 5 months has been funded through small donations. And even the larger organizations that did grant us money did so after doing like fundraisers of their own that, I think averaged out to donations under $60. So I think it ended up being empowering all around. It's a bit of the damn man thing, but it means that like if somebody says, oh, well, I only have $5 to give, well, that actually
absolutely makes a difference.
And it adds up. And it meant that when this flight took off, it was like standing alone on the tarmac out there. And
but that's the thing, you were not standing. And that's really, I think something, and I know that when you are the person in the eye of the tornado, right, it's very hard to realize this, but you absolutely were not standing there alone because so many of us were I'm getting choked up as I'm saying it, but it really, I think is hard for a lot of my listeners to express. It's certainly difficult for me to express. And I'm a writer. I'm supposed to do this professionally. How many of us were with, we were watching to the extent that we could watch as it was being live streamed, but our hearts and our souls and our hopes were with you. This is going to sound like a crazy thing to say, but my dad, who passed away a few years ago, who was a very committed animal rescuer and who taught me the value of animal rescue. And since he passed, I don't think I've ever felt closer to him than I did back in August when we were striving so hard to raise money and watching every second and checking our news feeds for updates every minute of every day that was going on. Because I felt him there with me in spirit, pulling for this to happen. And it really is hard, I think, to overstate how much it meant to so many of us this past week to actually finally get to see it come to fruition. And now to know that our seemingly small donations really were the things that made the difference means a lot, I think, to many of us.
It was. And yeah, my heart is a big heaping pile of broken grapes right now as well. It just I never I'm not shy, but I do like my privacy. I I never intended to be in the spotlight. And it's not.
It's hard to think of some place you could have gone initially to get out of the further out of the spotlight than Afghanistan. And you've been there. And so I do also want to emphasize, because I've been reading about you. I think I first read about you in the New York Times. It was years ago. You have been there since 2010, and it was not originally animal rescue that brought you to Afghanistan. It was your work as an anthropologist. And so I guess going back to the beginning, the first question I would have is, why did you, and what was it that made you decide to stay in Afghanistan and to work with rescue animals?
Well, I came to Afghanistan to do my dissertation research for my PhD, and I fell in love with it. It was the craziest place I'd ever been, and some of the things that sometimes I curse now, but like, you can't be passive. If you're passive, you fail. Like every single thing you have to fight for, and at the time that was a little bit more exciting than it is now, when like there's a whole lot of lives on the line. But it was a thrilling place for me, and
clearly you like a challenge.
Well, yeah, it was a bit of the challenge, but it was just it was dynamic. It was vibrant, and now it's dynamic in a slightly different way, I think. Sure. But so I did my PhD research here, and then I went back and I finished up the writing, defended the PhD. Knew from like the last 3 years of grad school that I had no intention of going into academia, never want to teach again. And I knew that I wanted to come back here. So I came back and was like, well, what can you do with a PhD? And as it turns out, nobody ever asks you what you got the PhD in. So
fair enough.
And, I ended up doing a lot of statistics for my dissertation, and, reading a few different languages. So it, the skills transfer. But I ended up doing a lot of research and evaluation work with the development, and, picking up a couple animals on the side. And I get that from my parents as well. So my dad has 9 cats in Chicago. My mom has, I'm not sure, she's never quite honest about it. There's always like her cats, and then the ones that used to be outside but are now inside. And I'm not sure what that number is.
The kind of floating number of cats. I actually have very dear friends in Tennessee who have a constantly floating number of cats.
Yes. Yeah. So, I come by it honestly as well. There's like I don't know, it's that inborn thing of like, oh, what is it? It's tiny, it's furry, it needs help. Okay, bring it home.
How do your parents feel? And I'm sorry, how do your parents feel about the fact that you are still, this is the Jewish daughter in me, by the way, like, how could you do this to your mother? But really, how do your parents feel that about you remaining there? They must be terrified for you.
I know that they were at first, right? I think that, I wasn't able to speak to them that much when I was at the airport. The phone signals were terrible out there.
Sure.
But they, I'm sure, at some point they knew that I was walking out of the airport, and it was held by the Taliban. And I don't know what they felt then, and they're gracious enough to not put that on me.
Sure.
And I've actually been very surprised by how steady they are. I think that, I've lived here long enough and have been sort of independent and on my own long enough that I think they trust me. And I think that they believe in what I'm doing. They believe in the effort. They know it's not, it's not some like half-assed idea that, that I'm being flippant about. And I try and be respectful of that as well. But, they've never asked me to come back. I'm not sure how I'd respond to that, but I think we've got a sort of, a happy medium there. I think my brother worries about me more, and occasionally gets a little pissed off at me. But
that's the job of the sibling when the parents aren't. I have a sibling also, and that's definitely the dynamic. If the parents are not complaining about it, then often the sibling feels that they have to on the parents' behalf. Whichever sibling is not the one worrying the parents at the moment.
Mom's worried, and I was
exactly.
Like, worried? She's like, actually, no, I think they're doing great. I'm like, ha.
I'm glad you brought up that day at the airport, because I did want to talk about that too. And I know that the plan originally was for the entire organization, or at least all the animals in your care, and for you to evacuate that day. And the staff, yeah. And so the plan was for everyone to leave, and we all heard the horrible story about the military forcing you to release the dogs into the airport, and that you ultimately ended up not getting onto the plane because you were holding this puppy B, who was at the time, I believe, had some walking issues. She was partially paralyzed, and it's one of those things, because I remember thinking when it was happening that I would never in a million years have had your courage, that I would have been that craven person. I would have said I did what I could, and I would have gotten on the plane. But then I also tried to imagine myself holding a young Homer, my blind cat, who I wrote a book about, when he was only a few months old and was blind and trusted me. And would I, holding him in my arms, have been able to put him down in the middle of a scene like that and leave? And I don't think I could have. And I would just like you to, I guess, to speak a little bit in that split second, in that moment when you made that decision, what that was like for you and what that felt like.
So there were a few decisions over it. I never intended to leave. So they kept sending over these like big groups of the big brawny like SEAL guys, and they're like, "Ma'am, do you know what's out there?" I'm like, "Yeah, actually, I do. I live out there." And they kept trying to convince me to get on the plane. And at one point, a consular officer was sort of like shadowing me in this silent, obnoxious way. And I said, like, as a U.S. citizen, are you legally allowed to put me on a plane? And they said, "No, ma'am, we're not." I was like, all right, then we're fine. Because once it became clear, basically late on the 29th, that there wasn't going to be a plane, then it became like how to get out. How do I get all of the animals back to the shelter? And it wasn't till later the next day on the 30th that we realized the full magnitude of that we could not. So the split second was they gave me about 2 minutes to run around, and I was actually originally looking for a dog that I knew had kidney failure, and I didn't know it at the time, but he'd already been taken out to this other part of the airfield and released. And so the second one was Bia, and I'd put her on an IV that morning. And they had said, you can't get any others out. You have to just take what you can carry. And so I took her, and I don't regret it, but there's no way to not feel guilty about every other one. And there's, I didn't grow up with any sort of framework of redemption. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in any sort of redeeming act. So that's going to be with me, because there are all the others. And I think that the real moment was initially they had said, "Oh, well, it's 2 a.m. You have to leave right now." And it was like, dude, you can't kick me out right now. Like it is actually 2 a.m. and I'm not going to make it out there.
No, I was going to say, you must know though that it really, the calculation is not the lives you were unable through no fault of your own to save, but the miracle of the lives that would never have been saved. If not, that it was never on the cards for them to be saved. And then you showed up. And that is the story, that there is no need for redemption. That you even think of it in those terms is amazing.
That might be how other people view it, but I think that sort of that calculus of guilt that that however my heart does it, it's there, and I don't expect it to go away. I've been able to either deal with it or, I don't know, push it down and become completely psychotic in the last few months, a little better than I was at first, when I think the grief just it was breaking. It just broke me for quite a long time. The moment was when, I got up to to walk out of the airport, and I'd found some like slightly cleaner clothes. I'd found some like sweatpants, and I had like a long sleeve shirt and a like a biker jacket on, and I couldn't find a headscarf. Like I'd used my headscarf to like clean up a dog at some point. And, they tried to find, there was like some shit covered dress on the ground. I was like, I can't put that on my head. Like, that's not. And so, this soldier from the 82nd Airborne, like walked me out and gave me a cigarette. And I like sat down for a minute beside the barbed wire, because there's like this little sort of no man's land. And he's like, you sure? And I'm like, well, I mean, it was sort of a pointless question, because I had already asked out of sheer curiosity. I was like, could I get on the last plane? And they were like, no, ma'am, CENTCOM has decided you cannot. And I'm like, awesome, CENTCOM. I hope to meet you in an alley someday. So it was that moment of like, there's between the sort of a domestic terminal and an airport circle, which is the entrance to the city. It's about, I don't know, maybe almost a half kilometer. And that was a walk, right? Because like every step is like closer to this city that it was held by the Taliban. People were guys were running around like basically beating people with these like sort of short rubber belt things, and it wasn't even clear why. Like, get in line, don't get in line, get in a crowd, don't get in a crowd. And I mean, like I'm pretty fair skinned and fair haired, and I wasn't wearing a headscarf, and I had Bia tucked under my jacket as best as possible, but it's still pretty obvious that I was carrying a dog. And I'd called the son of a fairly high-ranking Taliban member that I'd known through my work with the think tank, and I'd asked to please help. And so they did come and get me, and they brought me like in a abaya and a headscarf and like shoved me in the back of a car. And but there was there were, I don't know, maybe probably as short as 5 or 10 minutes when I was going from that circle to where I was meeting them at this like wedding hall thing that was down the street. And it was a very naked feeling, right? Like there's nothing that was gonna really do it. And sometimes you can walk around and feel empowered and feel like you can really beat your punching bag, but that was one of those days where it's like, I could get the shit beaten out of me and get killed in the next like 30 seconds, and there'd be almost nothing I could do about it. And so there was, the moments leading up to like stepping out there. It was just, it was a 1 foot in front of the other thing. And I'm not sure that had I imagined it to myself beforehand, I would have come up with that scenario. I'm not sure that I'd be able to imagine what I would do. I mean, half of the days here anymore. It's I don't know. It's a learning experience, I guess.
It sounds like it. I know from some experience that grief and guilt, and certainly the combination of those two things, is it's just among the more crushing emotions. I mean, truly, in the sense that they really do crush the life and the motivation out of you.
Absolutely. And it squeezes your lungs until nothing works.
Yeah. And yet you did get up. I mean, I'm guessing the next day or the day after, and begin making a plan to salvage as much as you could and to save as many more as you could, and to get everybody out. And I mean, what was it? Was it literally the next day? Was there some sort of a period of mourning or adjustment, or just the inertia of trying to cope with all these enormous feelings? What was that like in the immediate aftermath when you were trying to formulate a new plan?
The immediate aftermath was, I think, getting on the phone with Louise. And I mean, I think I got home sometime that afternoon. It was still light. And we started talking about how to get back into the airport. And Mayhew International was that they work for the city, so they had I think they had agreed to come in and get the dogs on the flight line. Sorry, one second. And so we thought maybe they will find some of ours. And I think by that point there'd been some, I think it was this September 1st or 2nd, some of the journalists had gone in and like seen footage of it. And we're like, those are our dogs. And then it became, I think on September 2nd was when we I just got fed up at no, we couldn't get any answers from anyone. So it was like, let's just go. Let's just go to the airport. And try and talk our way in. And it was almost comical because most of my staff speak Dari, and these were like Kandahari Taliban, and they only spoke Pashto. And it's like, this is like, we couldn't communicate at all. It was absurd. And obviously the staff were quite scared. I mean, it was intimidating at first, they sort of acted like a team that had just won something, and they're a bit brazen. But we got in fairly quickly, and I think part of how that worked was we were just honest. We said we're only here to pick up our dogs, and it was such an unexpected reason, and they were so confused about why I was here, and they were like, "You're American?" I'm like, "Yes." And they're like, "But you're a woman." I'm like, "Yep, I know." And
can't put anything over on you. I said, can't put anything over on you.
I think the advantage of being a woman that is also foreign, so I don't have some of the rules just sort of don't apply, but I'm very unintimidating, so I can get away with having completely insane requests, let me into the Canadian embassy. I must get the tortoise. And they, I get listened to a bit more because it is so odd. So in some way, I've used that to an advantage. I think it's one of the few, so got to try it. But we didn't immediately start regrouping on planes because the airport was closed. I think some people started looking into road routes, and that was pretty quickly shut down because it was super dangerous. I think at first, there were some days when we had heard reports about the border guards actually breaking up crowds with grenades, and it's like it's got to be effective. I was out at the Pakistani border, so I think that we didn't really start regrouping on what flight options could be until probably October, because we also, by that time, we figured out that we didn't know how. We started the question with a lawyer on I think in early October, because I was like, how do we pay taxes? Because if we don't pay taxes, our electricity will get shut off. But paying taxes is to a government that is a terrorist. So are we allowed to do that? And one of the first lawyers we'd spoken to said, yeah, nah, it's fine. And then we spoke to one that actually deals with OFAC licenses, and she was like, oh yeah, you've been breaking the Patriot Act for a month. And I'm like, oh, what? I'm going to go to jail for the rest of my life. It's like every cigarette I ever bummed to a guard was technically breaking the Patriot Act. And she's like, yeah, well, those are, it's considered basically
one of the lesser known hazards of smoking.
Right. And so we're like, oh my God, what do we need to do? And it's like, wow, well, we're not humanitarians, so we need to get an OFAC license. How the fuck do we do this? And luckily we hit upon, I think the most amazing lawyer in the world, and she got it expedited and pushed through within a month. And so then we actually could start working with them on the customs fees on it's every tiny little bit of customs paper is 200 AFs, right? Which is I don't know, $2.50 now just $2. And electricity bills and our payroll taxes. It's people talk about some giant bribes. It's not giant bribes. It's a $19 electricity bill, and trying to do that in such a way that it's not violating the Patriot Act. So we slowly started making plans, but the whole time we're trying to get more dogs. And it wasn't until really November when we really sort of made a real bridge with the Taliban leaders at the airport about the dogs, and started being able to work with them on trapping them. So the Qatari security brought in traps, And by that time we knew that they had taken the Garda World working dogs that we had, and those are mostly still there. And we're allowed to care for them and give them medical care, but we're at this point not allowed to remove them from the country. But it was sort of slow until, we basically reached a sort of critical mass and said, like, we're gonna try to get these ones out. Like, we're not gonna stop, right? But we're gonna try and get out what we have. And then what we had just ballooned. Right, because it was all these refugees that were leaving found out about us, and they're like, "Can I bring you my babies?" I'm like, "Oh my god!" Like,
so I know you had released all these dogs into the airport, but then your coffers, as it were very quickly refilled. It seems.
Yeah, and so of the 130 that were released at the airport, I mean, we know that about 20 died, and actually more like 25. And we saw their bodies, or we saw photos of them, or we knew about them. We've probably at this point gotten over 90 of the original ones out of the airport. But I think between 80 and 90 out of the airport. And then there's some of the Garda World dogs are still there as working dogs. Not all of them. We were able to bring 3 of the retired ones out on this last flight. And then we have several others at our house after this insane smuggling attempt. I won't go into some other jerk. But we actually have gotten most of them. But we don't have Thor, the husky. We don't have Dusty, who belonged to Jose. We don't have Nemu. We don't have Sweeta. And so actually one thing that our staff was working on earlier today, before we got called to like 3 different emergencies at once, was making flyers. So we're going to go and make another 500 flyers, pass them around everywhere. We're not giving up on them, and we don't intend to. I mean, even as I guess as recently as I think the first week of January, we trapped dogs that we'd lost in August. So like there is every reason to believe that they could be alive and findable.
I know that you would not be you if you did not focus on the losses, but I would not be me or responsible if I did not focus on some of your successes. And so I want to ask you, at the moment, this past week, when you were standing there watching this plane with 286 canine and feline souls aboard it take off into the sky and off to a new life in loving homes in a new country. And how did you feel in that moment as you were watching that happen?
I think half broken, and also half like we moved a fucking mountain like spoonful at a time.
Because you love these animals, and of course it is bittersweet. You are going to miss them, of course.
Yeah, but I mean, it's there's that old adage of if you love something, let it go. But I mean, if you love something, get it out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm sure plenty of people who care about you might say the same thing.
And there was great relief, but it was also it was one of that whole flight was one of those things where it couldn't be 99.9% on point. Every single thing had to work, and we had to have backup plans for absolutely everything, including World War III, by the way.
Yes, that's the whole Russia-Ukraine kerfuffle that I have to imagine must have thrown some kind of a monkey wrench. You had a Russian crew. Yeah.
We had a Russian registered plane and a Russian crew.
Always something, right? But it wouldn't be a triumph if it was easy, right?
No, although I think I could have stood it if it were.
It would mind a little easy. A little easier. Sure.
Nothing. No part of it was easy.
It does not seem like it.
I mean, so, in some ways it is that it was watching every every sort of bit of misery and like self like flagellation and sleep deprivation and every little bit of determination when you think you just can't anymore, that flew up in the air.
It just, it must, I wonder if you even, again, as the idea of the person in the eye of the tornado and as the person coordinating all of these logistics. And if it's hard for me to even really grasp how incredible an accomplishment this was. I mean, pulling this off, and I don't know, listeners may not realize it wasn't even just a matter of getting animals onto a plane and and then they land in Canada. It was a multi-leg journey. It took place in 4 different countries. There were teams of vet techs and volunteers to meet the animals at every stop. I mean, so this was a multi-part journey that you had different customs and international regulations. And I can't even begin. I mean, I used to do nonprofit events and just the paperwork for, locally here in the United States would be out of control. So I can't even begin to fathom what you must have done. And I wonder if there was ever a moment, if it was standing there on the tarmac watching the plane leave, or maybe in the days that followed, where you just had this sense of like, holy crap, I just pulled this off. I mean, if you have that sense of the enormity of what you've done.
Not until it landed in Vancouver. Cause like I was also opening the news and like, more Russian troops by the border. And as it turns out, Canada has a very high Ukrainian population, and they only need a prime minister, like executive decree to bring on sanctions. I'm like, just please not yet. So, we actually talked to a group of trade lawyers in Canada that were at the ready to apply for an import exemption for us if it became necessary. So, it wasn't until they got off the plane that like everyone was confirmed alive and well. Or, we had a few cats and a few dogs had to go get, they were a little dehydrated. We had a couple cats that had dry eye, which can be quite dangerous, gives little ulcers. So they went to get treated immediately. But everyone arrived well, and like there were tails wagging, and the team in Canada was prepared with this incredible shelter that they've built, and I think they've put up tons and tons of videos and photos online, and like it's I think one thing that's really I don't know, sort of bolstered me is that almost all these animals they're well socialized. They're happy. They love people. They went through like a horrendously traumatic journey, and you can see that they've been loved and treated with care and affection for months, and that's what we tried to build. We tried to build something that doesn't, it's not just treating them medically, which we're only moderately able to do in this environment, but we love them. Our staff are kind to them, and it shows. And I think that was that felt like a win, right? That felt like we did something right.
So now that this little accomplishment is over and behind you, tell me what your day-to-day looks like now. What a typical day at Kabul Small Animal Rescue looks like these days.
There's a lot of late nights right now because Vancouver is 12.5 hours behind us. And there's still a lot of like sort of logistics to manage, and like which cat goes here, like can't reach the owner here. Okay, the owner's stuck. Like a lot of the owners are like still stuck in vetting processes. So, working on fosters, and so there's still quite a bit of logistics there. And so I'm usually up really late, and then I nap randomly in the middle of the day when I just like can't take it anymore. I pass out in the car. But then we get constant requests for, there's an injured dog, there's an orphan dog. We took in 13 today, and I'm like, really? Like, can you guys?
And these were dogs that you've. So, I'm sorry. So these are Afghan nationals who are letting you know about these animals that need care.
Yeah, almost entirely. We got one call today from an international compound. But yeah, almost everything else is it's Afghans.
And I've also seen on your I've seen on some of your social media updates, and this is something I always find it important to emphasize. And one of my deeply held beliefs is that when you help animals, you also do help people. I think too many times there's this binary set up where it's you're faced with this, people get mad at you for choosing one over the other, rather than seeing it as a continuum. But I do want to say that you also, I know it's very cold there. It's winter also in Afghanistan. And that you have been, in addition to your work with animals, you've also been, if I'm correct, in seeing on social media, distributing some supplies and things like that to some of the people in your area as well.
Well, this is it's for our staff and their extended family. So we're not a registered humanitarian organization. So I'm not even sure that we could legally just sort of randomly go out and do that. Although we've occasionally done organizational gifts or donations to a couple orphanages, but yeah, I mean, it's we've increased pay because the currency is crashing. We do food aid, wood, blankets. We pay for medical care for extended family. Some of our staff are poorer than others, so we get blankets and coats and hats and shoes and. Initially we'd started back when we were funded entirely by my own salary. We were just getting coats for the guys that were outside. And now it's if somebody has a kid and it's cold and maybe they're the child of a second cousin's third cousin, just get them a fucking coat. This is, I don't really want to squibble about it, but at the same time, we're in a country of 34 million people in need. So we can't, and we don't claim to be able to make a big difference there, but we do try to take care of our own there. And it's hard.
There's tremendous poverty in Afghanistan right now. And I know that, and I think experienced rescuers certainly know that any place where there's poverty as poverty gets worse, so does treatment of animals, or at least the neglect of animals. And to a certain extent, that's understandable when people can barely feed themselves. It of course becomes impossible to feed or care for a dog or a cat or anybody else.
We're trying to we're giving, so we're not charging Afghans for anything right now. So I mean, we're trying to tell people if you need dog food, if you need cat food, if you need cat litter, we'll get it. Sometimes we don't have the best quality because it's just local, but it's something. We've just built all these outdoor cat houses, and it's take them. If you need dog houses, because a lot of people don't bring their dogs in, but they do love them. Just let us help. So we're trying, and I think that the compassion does spread. At the end of the day, though, we're an animal rescue. This is a country with thousands and thousands of organizations geared towards humans, and it's a country full of actual humanitarians that, at their philosophical core, do believe in the sort of primacy of helping humans first. And I think at the core of my heart, for what I think souls are, I think ours are worth the same. And I think that it's right to help what's in need, and what you're allowed to do. So sometimes people are well, why don't you help orphans? Well, as it turns out, it's illegal to pick up an orphan off the street, vaccinate it, put it in a crate, and fly it across the world. Not allowed to do that. It's called kidnapping.
A little bit more red tape involved than people might realize.
Is it becoming visible here that the street kids they don't have fat on their cheeks anymore? They're people are hungry. But it's that it's too big. It's too systemic a problem that it's caused by and can only be cured by these massive governments coming together and doing something. So we try and do a bit of an ink blot and just spread out from our staff, go to the neighborhoods, where they are, what's in need, and it's what we can do. It's what we can do, and it's what feels like a whole good.
Well, tell us again, for people who want to help you help others, What can people do to help you?
On our Facebook page, we have our fundraisers, and that would be the main way right now. But we're putting together a website, and we're going to try and put together ways that people can help from far. And there are ways, right? Like, admin help. We need translation help. We need somebody to do an Excel sheet instead of me. There's there are a lot of things that people can do. There's a lot of networking and fundraising and like applying for things that we can ask people for. And so I'm hoping that in the next couple of weeks, we actually get that website put together. And that's actually being done by some of the supporters, because I'm about as tech savvy as a doorknob. So
you do a very good job for.
Oh yeah, I can like barely turn around like the live video. I'm like, where's the button?
No, but you do a good job of keeping everybody continually updated to the extent that it's possible and realistic for you to do so on what you're doing. So
yeah,
I think that's remarkable.
You should do TikTok. I'm like, no, I shouldn't. Like, nope. I'm like I'm not under like 15. I'm not going to do TikTok. Yeah. So, I like right now it's a lot of it is monetary, but it's not even just that. Like a lot of the donations were things that came from like, oh, well, my neighbor told me about this. Right. So it's just sort of spreading the awareness that there's this effort, and we will do our very best with whatever we have. And it's so freeing now. Right. Like, I mean, we used to like be thinking about like, can we buy food? Do we have to pay electricity? We can't use the generator. We're going to do surgery by cell phone, like, right? And now like we actually have the funds to like to act the generosity of giving food when it's needed, of saying, yes, we can take in this litter of 4 and the other dog and the other 6 dogs. It like, is it hard? Like, yes. And we also pay overtime, because, we, luckily we have mostly fairly young staff, and they seem to not need as much sleep as I would like. But, we have this luxury now of actually being able to help where we see it without, having to second guess and like check the bank account 10 times before buying a bag of food. And that's precious. And so, yes, we will always need money. That's the way of the world. But we also need people's energy. We need people's time. We need people's creativity. And we need people to continue to care and to continue to see through this mud of misinformation and, I don't know, the media hype of everything that in some ways is so hyped up that it actually hides how awful it is. And we just need people to continue to care in whatever ways they do.
I was raised Jewish, and among Jews, we have a saying that to save a single life is to save the world entire. And I really hope that you never doubt how just, what an extraordinary thing you have accomplished, and how each individual life that you have saved truly is its own miracle. And I know that I speak for everyone who's listening today when I say that. And I thank you. I thank you for your heart and your courage, and for being so generous with your time with me today. Your time that I know is has so many demands on it, and is so precious and such a scarce resource at this point. I thank you for being so generous with me today.
It's a lovely talk. We should get together and talk about guilt and hearts again.
I'm Jewish. You don't want to talk to me about guilt.
I studied Second Temple Judaism in school. I loved it.
But I really yes, I'm sitting here crying to think of you crying with guilt after everything that you have done and the lives that you have saved. And it is extraordinary. And I see that you have been, so someone is chiming in to agree with me. It looks like you've been joined by a cat.
like go find the girl kitties outside because he needs to be neutered. He doesn't agree with me.
Surely cats are the same everywhere.
Yeah. Yes. I think he's going to start shredding me.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here. And I look forward to hearing it.
And thanks so much to all of you for listening. And I hope you'll come back to hear an all new episode next week. And that concludes this episode of Curl Up with a Cattail with Gwen Cooper. Don't forget to invite your feline-loving friends to listen to new episodes along with you. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, find out how to get your name and your cat's name included in my next book, or leave comments or questions for me to answer in future podcasts, head on over to gwencooper.com now. Thanks so much for joining me, and don't forget to hug your cat today.